Thank you, Zoltan. In England, we say you should always save the best until last. So obviously this will be the best panel at the show. Delighted to introduce my fellow panelists. This is Alexis from Gamification Specialists Unibo. This is also Robert Lenz, and I apologize if I get this wrong, Robert Lenzhofer from Huller Games, who, as I understand it, make fantastic slots with a German flair. Alongside, we have Andre, who is Senior Engineering Manager at Cloudflare, also stage sponsor, as you may have noticed. And last but not least, our good friend, Jose, who is Head of Innovation at All In Global. At least for myself, one of the things that attracted me the most in taking part in this panel is the diversity of people we have on show here. So amongst the companies that we have with gamification, slots, content, and also cybersecurity and operational security, a great way, I think, to start would be to ask, what is it like for each of you in the industries you're in as part of our industry to be running A, such a small but B, agile company in an industry like ours?
Sure, I guess I can start here. Alexis, I've been in the industry since 2008 now, and we started Unibo about 4 or 5 years ago. And I mean, it's been a wild ride. I think it's very fun to run your own company and try to take the shot at making it. And if you have a great idea, and I think in this industry now we've seen a lot of spreading out of this in the smaller niche markets. So before, operators did everything themselves, and now operators need to focus on generating revenue much more than they have in the past. And I see them buying services much more in more niche products instead of focusing on all the development themselves.
Very nice.
Robert, we build good games, I think, at least for the German market and further out. And our company is 2.5 years old, and it's interesting to observe what's going on from a technology perspective, I feel, at the moment. When you build front-end and back-end stuff, whatever you want to call it, games, HTML5, JavaScript, and so on, I think in the last 10 years, especially in the last 10 years, there have been some, I would call it silent technology advancements and shifts, which makes it quite substantially easier to build games these days. And that's also reflective of how many studios are being launched, basically. I saw a social media post from Slots Catalog, and they published how many studios they added each year. And I think up until like 5 years ago, it was like 10 studios, 5 studios per year, and now it's like 50 studios, 60 studios per year. So yeah, it's a lot of movement in the industry.
So I think I'm the diverse panelist you were talking about, because I am not in particularly in the industry, but it's interesting to see we have a lot of customers that are in the gaming industry, and the innovation that comes out of them and the things that they are asking us to innovate on is incredible. Some of the technologies that they want us to start adopting and start supporting and start pushing towards, more bandwidth, lower latency, things like that. It's really, really interesting to see, even smaller companies that are just trying to innovate and like asking us for these kinds of features. It's really cool to see happen.
So, as part of a language service provider dedicated to the iGaming industry, let's say we have one foot on the localization industry, learning about what's happening, how is technology evolving in the localization industry, but also being like this domain specialized service provider, bringing the best of this localization technologies and solutions to the iGaming industry. And being a small company also, like a 25 employees company, but 15 years in the industry. It's interesting how we can be learning from the iGaming industry and how is it evolving, and also from the localization industry, how is it evolving, and quickly adapting the best of the needs from the gaming and the offering from the localization, bringing the best to iGaming industry.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for those lovely views. The next question I wanted to ask, there's a running joke in London, shall we say, that if you want to succeed in gaming, you're going to either have to do time at Playtech or NetEnt. For yourselves, who have founded companies or have been key to your company's growth, would you say that it's better to be part of a, shall we say, a smaller, more agile company today, or to be part of the bigger behemoth companies, let's say Evolution would be a good example now? If you could go back in time and you had to choose between being able to be part of the founding or the growth of the companies that you're in, or to be part of a bigger company today, what would you prefer in an industry like we are in now, where tech is so flexible and possible to innovate so much?
I guess I could start with answering the question. I was managing director for the casino brands at Betsson Group before I started these companies, so that pretty much answers the question easily. But I think it's great to have been part of smaller companies and bigger companies. You have seen the full range. If you work with smaller companies, you often have more hats on. You will do a lot. You will get exposure for a lot larger area of the entire industry. You might meet providers much more often, or different kinds of providers, and even understand what the total cost of running a business like a gaming business is. Many often, if you work for a bigger operator, they will hide much of the cost for you, so you don't actually know exactly how much they earn, unless, of course, they are publicly listed, and they will show some top or bottom level figures, and then that's what you know. But smaller companies, you get to much more exposure, and you can probably learn a lot more. But also, it's great to be in bigger companies where you can understand how to do the processes properly and set up the processes that you in smaller companies kind of want to run through instead of repeating.
Yeah, so our company consists of 6 people, so that answers the question as well. We are adding people, but bit by bit and slowly. And I think what's interesting when a company is young and doesn't have a lot of staff, you can have really meaningful impact. If you have good founders, good co-founders, basically, you have senior people with resources given to achieve a certain task and with motivation, because it's in our case it's our company. So what we're seeing in certain areas, what things we develop, for instance, we have developed now we are selling now also as a dedicated product our remote gaming server. And just to set up such a project, basically in companies like you have mentioned, and that it becomes a sales proposition and it becomes a product which technically and legally and marketing-wise can stand on its own 2 feet is difficult in a large company, I would say, yeah.
So I started my career in startups, and the thing that I didn't realize until a lot of years later was I just didn't know what I was doing when I was trying to build these technologies, and not necessarily in gaming, but in any kind of technology. And so, having looked back at being at larger companies, I have that experience in building different kinds of systems and building these bigger things, but also what good looks like in those larger companies. And then looking back and looking at other people that are doing startups now, you have a little bit more experience in what to do in a smaller company like that.
That's very nice.
Following with what I was mentioning before, I think being a small company or a medium-sized company help us react rapidly to what's new in the iGaming industry. So there are, in content and localization solutions, there are big companies serving lots of domains, lots of industries, and then we have found that we can benefit and also serve better by learning and catching up with what's happening in the iGaming industry. So that helps us being more rapidly in adapting to what's happening in the industry.
Very nice. I think also one of the things, or definitely a pervasive element of the talks we have had over the last few days, ChatGPT stands out quite a lot for me. Luckily, as a PR, I'm not going to lose my job just yet. But if we look at the way technology is now in our industry, and especially I think particularly for maybe Robert and Alexis, when it comes to gamification and slots, would it be possible to do what you are doing today 10 years ago? Or because of the way, let's say, tech has advanced, has that finally made it possible that you can be a very small company and still make a very big difference.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that technology is evolving all the time, and we've seen the thing that every 2 years, every 3 years, if you start anew, your technology is so much better because it evolves everything, and you can catch up quicker. And yeah, if you do something 10 years compared to 10 years ago, then you have an outdated technology that you can't work with. Which brings me to, I saw the other day that I think Playtech signed with Tab in New Zealand, and for 25 years. So they're probably going to change that platform at least twice during that 25 years, hopefully more times. So yeah, I think smaller companies that has always in internet and technology and so on has a chance to just start if you start later, because everything is faster, stronger, better. So you're starting from a completely different starting point, basically.
Yeah, so like concretely in our case, we like 10 years ago, we would have needed a lot more resources, and we wouldn't have the high quality of software services we can simply get. There's a lot of good open source projects out there. For instance, GitLab, GitHub, every developer uses, yeah, but it hasn't been like that forever. I don't know since when it was open source, not sure. Yeah, so there you go, yeah. And then we use, for instance, for our statistics and reporting, we use Grafana. It's also open source, and we self-host, basically. So these are enterprise-grade, perfect tools, yeah. 10 years ago, impossible. And ChatGPT and AI, I think we have seen, I think, I read this the other day, what we're seeing so far is the weakest version of AI. So it's going to be interesting what the next weeks or months bring, because development is really fast in that area.
I think that's a very interesting point, and I think this connects nicely with the next idea of, let's say, localization. So for my company, for example, we're looking very strongly at LATAM right now. But the massive issue is that the way, for example, one is to communicate with players in Brazil or, let's say, Mexico, Chile, wherever else. It's one thing to know the language and maybe have an AI-powered tool that can translate into whatever localized language you want. But I guess, especially Jose, this could be a good question for you. I mean, is there always going to need to be that human element to oversee any automated system? Because to expect a robot to immediately understand how to communicate, let's say, with players in Mexico, would that ever be possible?
Yeah, I think that's with the hype of AI and ChatGPT, this is the hot topic, and almost to all industries is coming this panic of am I gonna lose the job? In this between content writers and linguists is like also a topic, and I want to bring to the table like three aspects for that question. One is the fact of like the explosion of volume of content in like for all markets. Second is this like the development of the machine translation technology, and third is the workflow integration of companies. Let me connect the dots for those three topics. In terms of explosion of content, I think it's super important to understand that the volumes, like the orders we are getting from our clients are becoming more challenging in terms of speed, but also in volume, because the layers that needed to be localized are increasing. So let's say for operators, it's not only now the product, the documentation around the product, but also this challenge of getting customer service and offering customer experience, sounding local but having like efficient use of resources. So that takes us to live translation. And you have this challenge, like, okay, you just plug to Google Translate or this kind of or even ChatGPT that can translate into many languages. And then it's your reputation at risk. So who I trust in terms of to whom I plug in. So what we are seeing as a trend and also working on is how do we combine the best of human talent and the tools that are evolving rapidly. And it's from deep learning and from AI, it's this concept of human in the loop. So if we think of our language experts as humans in the loop for the machine translation engines, in our case, we own 25 machine translation engines trained on almost 15 years now of our terminology expertise into 25 markets for gaming. So it's our expertise for the domain and also for the market, for the let's say the languages, feeding this engine. So that's what we are trying to master and working on, so that we can serve better in terms of real-time translation. So that's the side of the speed, but there will be always the need of like a human touch in sensitive topics like legal aspects or creative aspects. So there's this transcreation where you need to adapt and bring the creativity of the person. So let's say we see that as an equalization, or like a balancing the quality versus the speed. This is one thing, and then if we connect that with the workflow integration, it's like we are working on, and there is this concept in the industry of lang ops, trying to bring in the concept of DevOps, but to language operation. So there's a lot of movement in the language industry, and we're getting the best of it for the iGaming industry in terms of how do we integrate our workflows to serve in real time and reduce significantly turnaround time for language solutions at all levels.
That's a wonderful answer, thank you. And it's just occurred to me, and I'm going to have to ask this. Robert, as someone who runs a slot studio, could you ever get a robot to make you a slot?
I saw, like, there is this podcast, I don't know if you know it, All In, and there's this one guy, David Friedberg, he posted something interesting on Twitter a few weeks ago, and basically the model will break. The model of you develop one thing for many players, basically. It will be many for many, basically. I think there will be a point in time where you can basically go online. I mean, unfortunately, we have regulation and certification and that kind of stuff. But there will be a point in time where you can go online and say, I want to play this slot, and create it for me on the fly. That will happen, yeah, for sure.
That's fascinating. In my case, I'd like a positive RTP. And if we stay on the subject of automation, Andre, I think in particular when we were having a conversation last week on to what we could speak about on the panel, you mentioned a big part or an issue that the industry has now is in regards to bots and traffic, etc. I noticed this myself with Bet365. If you're betting too well, they'll log you out every few seconds because a bot can't log back in. Is that a big part of what you're seeing in terms of changing in the industry now?
Yeah, for sure. And there's some pretty scary stats about that kind of stuff. So about 6% of all HTTP traffic that we see is bad. And about half of that, so about 3% of all HTTP traffic is bots. So it's a non-trivial amount of requests per second that are bots. And that's across, all of our customers, not just gaming. So yeah, absolutely. It's a huge, huge concern, and I'm sure the other people here will agree that determining whether the thing that is trying to interact with your servers is a human or not is crucial for the other players that are human, but it's also a really hard problem to solve.
Is that something that would then connect in terms of, let's say, gamification or slots themselves? I mean, could you get then bots running bonus abuse programs?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, I could 100% say that there's lots of bots out there doing bonus abuse for casinos and using fake identities, and well, then you can determine how intelligent the bots are and how many bots one person can run, so to say. You can set up 10 different computers. I know even I have my brother used to be a gold farmer in World of Warcraft. He used to have a sofa full of 10 computers that just produce gold. So botting has been around for quite some time, and there's value in it, both from the worker side in terms of World of Warcraft for bonus abuse or something that's grayish area, and then of course Cloud8 here they see the bad side where it's literally bots trying to take you down and ask for money so that they stop doing it, right?
Then, in that case, do you think, in terms of the way, if we look at the next 5-10 years, especially again, I mean, you gentlemen are definitely at the cusp of, let's say, future technology in the industry. Is the way this is changing in terms of automation going to change the way that you approach your everyday business challenges in terms of, let's say, everything, creating slots, cybersecurity, content, whatever else?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's gonna get easier to set up companies like this. Yeah. I mean, we are. The proof is in our pudding. Our company, 5 people, 6 people, launch 1 to 2 games per month, basically, and we are live in not only in Germany but in many jurisdictions, and it will only get easier. So that will change, and I think you have sometimes an advantage by starting a new company because you start from scratch. And you can look at the new fancy tools which are out there and use those. But when you obviously have settled at some point, when you're a more mature company, when you settled on your tools, it's harder to like find the new shit, basically, the new stuff. But it's no doubt. But there's also a point: how much smaller, how much leaner can it get? Basically, that's another point. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Fantastic. And then, last but not least, if we let's consider this as the last panel of the day and the way we'd like to wrap up and leave our participants with some parting thoughts. In terms of the way each of us would see the industry in the next 5-10 years and how we would like to be a part of that, I mean, what direction do we think it's going to take? I mean, I'm probably maybe the youngest person here in terms of everyone lined up, but I've been in the industry for the last 5 or so years. If we look at the last 10, and how far we've come since 2010. If we look ahead to 2030, where would we like to see the industry going in terms of content, creation of slots, technology, etc.? How different do we think it's going to be in 10 years' time?
Should we answer one by one? Yeah.
Let's do that.
I think that over the last 10 years, I mean, even 10 years ago, people were saying it's too late to start a provider. It's too late to start an online casino or online sportsbook, and then we can see that Stake, probably one of the biggest now. They started 3-4 years ago, or 5 maybe. So obviously, it always just keeps. Well, the whole industry has been growing, and obviously, online gaming has grown, and it's growing, and it's expanding the jurisdictions in the US. It's just going to bring in more money when Asia gets more regulated and so on. I mean, as we grow, and this is still a very young industry, right? We're going to see it have some ups and downs, but I think in the long run, it's going to be a very, very big and a very interesting industry, which has a lot of niche companies that can service particular parts for operators or for providers that every provider and operator or similar doesn't need to build everything themselves again. Like we saw before when in the operator time in the 90s and the early 2000s, then you build your platform and you build everything in the platform. And many of the companies, they built their own sportsbook, they built their own games. You have Betsson, NetEnt, they were together from the start, right? And Kindred and Kambi and so on. So we're splitting up the companies, and companies are more focused on streamlining and focusing on the thing that is their core competencies, right? You get rid of the additional things that just takes time from you, where you can do it better in other things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And your company, case in point, yeah, I call this decoupling basically. So you used to have central systems, central platforms. Also, when you look at e-commerce, you had your central e-commerce system, but now you have all this in regular tech, not in iGaming tech. You have all these tools out there to do your online marketing, to do your hosting of sites, development of sites. It's pretty insane. Of course, the industry, it's online gambling, so there's a regulation, and that's always going to slow certain things down. But I think because, and that's basically the theme for me, things get easier technically, and even more so in the coming years. So companies like yours, Unibo, and like the software we now sell as well, besides games, we sell our RGS. This is now, because it gets easier, you need a smaller budget to create companies like these. So I think you will see a lot of small companies, like 5-man teams, 10-man teams, 3-man teams, who basically provide a service or product which was simply too expensive to build 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So, yeah.
Just to interject there, actually, certainly I notice this as most of my clients are slot studios. You'll always get that one exciting brand who comes onto the scene. So let's say Quickspin for the player, No Limit City, arguably once, their 10th. There'll always come a day when a major company will come along and buy them. Do you think straight after that happens, the creativity is always going to be lost?
I think there's two problems you can have. When you're losing, that you don't know why you're losing, that's one problem you can have. And the other one is when you're winning and you don't know why you're winning or did win in the past. And that's the more dangerous problem, because you don't tackle it basically. Yeah? And my assessment, I don't know NetEnt too well, but I feel NetEnt didn't know why they were winning basically. And that was, so you don't know where to start, where to optimize basically. And I think, people want to do an exit at some point, probably, simply because, your time on the planet runs out at some point, yeah, so you want to conclude projects at some point. But the model is a little bit, I wonder, it's a question more than a statement, I wonder whether the model of Evolution buying studios is the right model, basically, because we see not a lot of growth in RNG and Evolution, so I'm not sure what's the right model. I think again, there will be a lot more smaller studios coming out, and they will essentially compete with the big ones in the end. They are leaner, they're faster, they're more local, they're more targeted, and a big organization with one big studio will be quite hard, I think. I think the way to solve it probably for an Evolution is to create mini companies inside Evolution to tackle this basically. That's what I would say.
So I guess, and I suddenly realize this is probably a plug for a client of mine, but if you look at the relaxed gaming model where you have a company that will support and help and foster that growth, but not get in the, shall we say, get in the way of the creation process, would that be the best way to go forward?
How do you mean that?
So if you look at, again, I realize I'm suddenly shamelessly plugging a client of mine, but okay, let's talk about Yggdrasil. They're not a client of mine. They have their Masters program. So you have that aggregation and to a certain extent support in distribution of a slot, but they don't get in the way of the actual creative process. You know, that one element that makes that smaller studio, let's say like yourself, special in that you have only a few people and a bright idea. Could that be the future of the next 10 years, do you think, without those big brands getting in the way, should we say, of exciting ideas?
Maybe, I'm not sure. I mean, at the end of the day, when you basically dissect a game studio, especially, and understand why a game studio is winning, basically, you realize it's often just like one really good producer in the company sometimes, yeah. So meaning, like, how can you replicate this at scale? Hard, yeah. So and you need motivation, you need dedication and blood, sweat, and tears, and so on. So I think the small companies will win against the big companies. without them necessarily getting much bigger, there will be just more of them, basically.
I believe the Americans call that capturing lightning in a bottle. And for yourself, Andre, on your side, you've mentioned at the beginning of the talk how you've been on startups, and then of course Cloudflare is a very big company. If we look at the developments of your side of the industry for the next 10 years, would you say startups are going to be key to the, should we say, agility of the ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. And both of you have mentioned the ease of technology and those kinds of things, and it's only becoming easier to specifically like deploy code anywhere that you want to. And so I was thinking about like, you write a little bit of code and you don't really necessarily care where or how or it runs or anything like that. And then I was thinking about like regulations and things like that. And it's going to be really difficult for regulations to keep up with the technology, to be able to capture and accomplish what they want to in these regulations when borders don't necessarily mean anything when you're deploying code. Your code may run in 90 different countries. What does that mean for the regulations that you're going to be in? What does that mean for how you have to think about your customers? And I think that's going to be a really, really big problem as the pervasiveness of I just ship code, I don't care where it runs, happens, or who uses it.
I think that ties in quite nicely as well. One thing that we can ask Jose for the end as well. I mean, if you look at, especially I know you guys are very big in Latin America, for example, the ability to create a product and then deliver it on a, shall we say, localized scale, is that going to be a massive edge that content companies like yourself will be able to hold over the market for the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think the localization and content service is evolving from let's say, from a service provider to a software as a service solution, like a modular solution that can be plugged to your systems so that you can get the most of the technology that is evolving every day more, but always with this, I would like to call it this cultural mediation that is, and especially for domains like gaming, you need not only the person that is, the expertise that is not only for the language and the locale. Latin America, I'm from Colombia, and there are the nuances, and there are some contents that need to be really thought for the market of Colombia, for Venezuela, for Peru, for now that is booming Brazil. So we get, let's say, the humans augmented by the technology, but the solution is more perceived like this module that is like you plug into your services in terms of to your solutions, like as the language solution module that integrates into the platforms and the for the operators, for the game developers.
I think that's wonderful, and as I covered at the beginning, I think in terms of the diversity of companies we have, I mean, myself being PR, gamification, slots, cybersecurity, and then also content, I think we've done a great job in terms of bringing together what is hopefully the most diverse panel at the show. I guess that's quite a good way to finish, actually. If we pass on to the audience, are there any questions on the diversity of topics we've covered today? No, then I'll get on to the last thing I wanted to say. This is my second Prague Summit. I wanted to give a big shout to Zoltan at the very end. I've been to a lot of industry events over the last few years, especially in London, etc. But I think the wonderful thing Zoltan has always done, and especially at a show like this, the community spirit and friendship at shows like this is wonderfully unique. So I'd like to, I guess as the last panel of the show, say a big well done to Zoltan for such a great show. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick. That's not the last panel.